Hello, everybody, and welcome to Humans of Reliability. Today, I am joined by Jessica Fink, who I'm very excited to chat with. So, why don't we just jump right into it? Jessica, if you could just tell us a little bit about who you are and what your relationship to reliability and incident response is.
Thank you, Ashley, for having me. I'm Jessica. I have had a long career coming up to 15 years now, working in operations, technical, customer operations, business operations, you name it. I've originally started in Germany, working on call center operations, working on business programming, coming up to quality management from call center teams and learning all about, what does it mean to have a service out there. Then I moved to London for 6 years, where I've been working on the first contactless mobile payment wallet out there, helping the team launch a stable product into the market. So really going to the product team and asking the fun questions like, what should your error codes in the app look like? Should your app fail? Which was met with disbelief, since products are obviously perfect and would never have any issues. So it was really fun working with them through the support setup and contractual agreements with vendors and third parties of that, building a service desk team for the first time. And then I left London to join Grab Taxi in Singapore almost 5 years ago now, where I've been responsible to the technical operations strategy in regards of uptime, in regards of incident response, and kind of the support journey I had so far turned onto the purely engineering side. If we have an outage, what do we actually do? Who's answering the phone? How quickly do we need to respond to issues? And yeah, I think see the red thread has always been purely on the production side of things, purely in the market side of things, where we say, if a customer has an issue, how do we want this to be taken care of? How is the experience behind that actually? How well did we do as a company? And in the last 5 years, my burning questions for myself is, why do I need to have a customer call me in the first place? Why can I not have preventative issue management, where reliability then really comes up to be a much bigger focus place in automating a lot of things, and maybe even just being faster than a human can realize that something broke.
I love that. It's really cool to hear about roles that have more of like an operational focus or people with that background. Because I'm seeing more and more of those roles. And I myself, that's like kind of the path I took to get into incident response. And a lot of people don't realize early on that you don't have to be an SRE to be involved in this line of work. There's a lot of other elements to it. And with that, you and I both come from a non-engineering or non-computer science background. Did you ever find that to be like a learning curve where suddenly you're trying to understand a more technical concept in order to build a plan around it?
I think I had the biggest learning curve joining the engineering team in Grab. When you join and you suddenly hear a bunch of words you've not heard about or have to read postmortem reports you do not understand. And thankfully, it has actually never been called out as a blocker. The secret I had is, find the person with the answers, make some good friends, find your kind of help us on the floor that can give you some advice or translate it into a little bit more consumer-friendly language if needed. But also it was an advantage because you always come in with not a technical mindset, but with a consumer mindset. It's like, you tell me there's an issue with whatever server, with whatever part of the infrastructure. What does it mean for the customer? What do it look like in the app? Because that's what we ultimately care about. So I always brought in a more factual thinking into the whole discussions. You can tell me whatever piece of the code broke in this moment. I need to understand how we're going to mediate it on the user side. And then we can talk about the technicalities after and bring them out there, which has been really interesting to see that being, driven through the Grab teams, because they obviously very technically really smart people out there. And if you just want to focus on technical conversations, I would have been lost 5 years ago.
Yeah, I totally agree that it can be like a superpower in some ways, because I had a similar experience at Shopify where I was doing incident communications and operational things, and the product itself is very technical. Like, it's a massive e-commerce platform on cloud infrastructure, and most of the incidents are going to be deeply technical, related to this big complex infrastructure, monolith, or whatever it might be. And it was that ability to follow along and, figure out what's going on. That takes some time. like you said, make some good friends with engineers. Google also. I did a lot of Googling.
The interesting part was, especially for incident response, doing the communication and doing it right to the correct stakeholders was so important for me, because even if I would do the communication or assign people to do so, you still need someone that can translate the jargon of all the technical details for the mostly business-centric leadership. And that was very interesting to sometimes see that, a technical leader communicating and then a business person communicating and the difference between these two.
Yeah.
I fully agree. There's pros and cons, probably.
It's good to have yourself as that, gauge of like, do I feel like I really understand this at this point? It's a whole, you can't understand it until you can explain it very simply. It's like the explain it like I'm five principle, but explain it to a customer or an executive.
Yeah.
Something I also saw, and I think that you mentioned, is part of your role at Grab, you were responsible for, keeping everything within SLOs and overseeing those reliability metrics. And I'm curious what you think is an incident response metric that people should care more about.
Oh, that's an interesting one, because we've tried to define a long list of metrics that we wanted to look at and, say this is the top 5. And the problem is that if you ask 5 different teams what their top 5 is, you will get 5 different answers, which was probably the biggest wisdom out of these conversations is who is ultimately owning the service needs to define it for themselves. Because what the most important number for me is on the process side that just sets the target might be very different from the product team that actually says this part of the user journey is important for us. Out of my personal experience working in call center and support for such a long time, I'd say probably triaging time is one that always falls off blindly, where people tend to ignore the impact that you can do if you have optimized how quickly can you allocate the issue to the right team. That's one of the most fun to work with, because there's a lot of you can automate, a lot of to improve. Things like response time, resolution time is more on the easier side, but triaging is a little more difficult to achieve and especially get it right.
Yeah, I love that. I think, metrics in this world are such a can of worms and something that people have strong opinions on a lot of the time, one way or another. And we work with hundreds of different companies at Rootly, and I don't know that anybody really feels like they have the metrics thing like figured out. So I always like to hear different perspectives on like, what do you measure? What do you think is important? What do you think is a waste of time? MTTR is always a hot topic as to whether or not something that's worth really caring about. So yeah.
CSAT or not, yeah. The lucky part of my career was since I've started at the call center, really answering the phone calls and be like, hello, can I help you? You get so much insights of the pain points on that exact station of a customer care agent that you're trying your best to solve that for the rest of your career effectively. If I can avoid a call even landing on a call center agent, then I did something right. But that's not a reactive metric. That's really preventative in a sense, and that's where I'm trying to find a more challenging metric to be set at. Can we avoid an issue from happening in the first place? But how do you measure that? That gets very difficult to define.
Yeah, totally.
Opportunity costs. It's like we avoided something we didn't even know we avoided in the first place.
Yes, that was one of the big challenges that I found also trying to set metrics is like exactly that. You're counting the things that didn't happen, or you're trying to find a way to count that or quantify that.
It's like the person that gets rewarded is mostly the person, responding to most severe outages, not the person that actually worked on preventing them 2 days earlier, like where it was just, still an early alert issue and someone just did the right thing and avoided it from happening, which is really difficult to measure. You can take historic data and say, oh, we have since last 5 years, reduced the amount of alerts or had less outages, but it's hard to correlate that back to maybe, the skills that went up, or maybe the process was improved, or there was a better tool in place. So it's a very intricate network you need to get together and get the data right to figure it out.
Yeah. And even on the customer side, you're not really going to see typically like a positive sentiment, but yes, you might be able to see how negative they are not. Like you're kind of aiming for neutral in a way.
The most fascinating part about our jobs is like you have to automate yourself away, which is hard to do, because then technically not needed anymore is a strong word, but if you really brought most of the issues down and it turns so quiet, So how do you want to explain that to the business that your job is still valuable and has been leading to that outcome effectively?
Yes. Luckily, I've found that in most companies, there's no shortage of problems. So, you kind of work yourself out of one job and into the next and so on.
That's very fair.
And as you mentioned, you are currently based in Singapore, which is actually where we met.
Yes, I was actually moving with the new role from London almost 5 years ago.
Awesome. Do you have any advice for people who are considering a big relocation for a job? Because that's a pretty big one.
Yes, having done it twice now is pack light. You really can buy everything again. So don't waste time on shipping and don't waste time on packing too many boxes. It is really the best fun if you can grab a luggage and just show up one day with your most important stuff and then just do it from scratch from there. It is an interesting way of rebuilding style, your interests, your hobbies, that I would highly recommend everyone doing at least once in their life.
I love it. And speaking of Singapore, my favorite, well, I don't know, favorite. There were a lot of things I liked about Singapore, but probably my favorite part was the food. Um, what is one food that everyone should try if they're in Singapore?
I love, and I think it is somewhat Singaporean. I haven't seen it much elsewhere yet, maybe in Malaysia. It's a salted egg chicken. It's creamy salted egg sauce, crispy chicken, rice. It is delicious. It's not healthy at all, unfortunately, but it's very, very good. I've not seen it anywhere else, and I could eat a kilogram of it.
That sounds incredible. I think my favorite thing I had there was maybe the chili crab. I also
Yeah.
tried the kaya toast. I don't know about the kaya.
No, absolutely.
When I ate it, I was like, huh. And then afterwards, I felt like I had a brick in my stomach. I've
Oh,
never felt so unwell after a food. It's like white bread, sugar, like a half inch of butter. You dip it in an egg.
it's not a marmalade. I think it's more like they mush it up a little bit.
Yeah, it's just sort of coconut spread thing.
Yeah, very good.
It's interesting. It's tasty, but it made my tummy hurt.
Yeah.
Awesome. I have one last question for you, and that is, what is your favorite or most used non-work related app on your phone?
Oh, that's a good question. I play Dungeons and Dragons a lot, so it's probably all the apps I need to play Dungeons and Dragons and all related like tabletop games I have on my phone because you build huge character sheets and you need to keep track of them, and there are really good apps out there that help you do that. So that's probably my number one hobby app that I would look at.
I didn't know there were apps for that. We have in our basement somewhere, we've got like a ton of D&D stuff, and we have like the paper character sheets. Now I feel like we've been wasting our time.
Well, yeah, you don't want to like scribble these in and out all the time and then print them off again.
Amazing. Well, that's all the questions I have for you today, Jessica. It's been so much fun to chat, and hopefully we'll get to see each other in person again soon. But until then, I'll catch you next time. See ya.
Hey.